no action is anticipated today, but we will start with the Pima County First Avenue project from Orange Grove to Ina. And I understand Jonathan Crow is going to give us a PowerPoint presentation.
Great, I'll go ahead and get started. Hey Bob, welcome. Glad to see you here. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Crow, and I am the principal planner for Pima County Department of Transportation. I'm gonna get my slideshow up and running here. Let's see.
While Jonathan is looking for a slideshow, I'll just say I'm Catherine Skinner. I'm a deputy director with the Pima County Department of Transportation. We also have Steve Wilson on the line, who's an engineer with the department and helped put together some of the estimate for this.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate that.
Okay, can everybody see the first slide?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Good. All right. Well, I was asked to put together a little slideshow similar to what Patrick Hartley put together recently on the city's First Avenue project. Let's get right into it. So, as mentioned, Pima County is requesting a scope change to the First Avenue project from a continuous 4-lane divided roadway to the existing roadway configuration with improved bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Let's look at First Avenue. It's about a 1-mile length section of roadway. To the south, it is in fact a 4-lane divided roadway with a median. And then to the north of Ina, it's a 2-lane collector. So this 1-mile section of First Avenue makes that transition from the 4-lane down to a 2-lane collector in this stretch. Land use is really built out. There's hardly any vacant property. It's mostly low density residential and a little bit of medium low density residential, as you can see in the bottom of the aerial photograph there, closer to Orange Grove Road. And then you'll also note that the Keno School is located along this segment. I want to make one little adjustment to my screen if I can, because I've got all your faces on the screen with me and it's blocking some of my notes. So if I can figure out a way to adjust that, I can see most of my notes. Otherwise, I'm just going to go on memory.
Well, maybe we can all step aside.
No.
Yeah.
You know, we'll make it work. I should be able to plow through this without all my notes. All right.
Yeah. If Jonathan, if you take a look at the upper right corner, there should be a little icon, looks like a tic-tac-toe icon. You know, you would be able to change your view with that.
Okay. Oh, I think I've got it. Thanks, Jim. Perfect. All right. So why are we here? A little background. The original or the existing First Avenue project was in the 2006 plan. The scope was simply to widen the 4-lane arterial with bike lanes and sidewalks. The cost estimate was obviously in 2006 dollars, a little bit over 7.2 million. The bulk of that coming from the RTA and just 700,000 coming from Pima County. So why a change in scope? Well, first off, it's been 15 years since the passage of the RTA plan, and a lot has changed. Community needs and preferences have changed, and we wanted to particularly revisit the assumptions about traffic growth and how best to expend limited funds. The county's policy framework has also changed, and our vision is much more focused on making sure we're meeting the needs of all users and providing viable transportation choices to all members of the community. Costs for construction, which had been remarkably stable in the past, have been increasing in recent years. So we need to acknowledge these increases in light of limited funds. And all of this information can help us to right-size public investment to make sure we're addressing the needs of the community as they exist today and invest in the right project to advance our community's transportation goals. So as mentioned, we recently submitted our recommendation to the RTA, recognizing that the pattern and velocity of growth has changed over the past 15 years. and with a primary goal to meet current and future anticipated capacity without diminishing functionality. So what are we recommending? We're recommending to keep the existing number of through lanes, to mill and overlay the entire roadway while modernizing the roadway with new pavement, an ADA accessible sidewalk, improvements to bike lanes if possible, and landscaping. Now, we've looked at project costs, and I think this is really important. So in 2006, the project estimate was a little over 7.2 million in 2006 dollars. If we project or expand those dollars to today's money, I think it's reasonable to assume that the project would cost over $11 million and probably significantly more. That 11 million is what you achieve if you just assume a modest 2.5% inflation per year over the 16 years. So it's our belief that the actual cost would be even higher. So we developed a planning level cost estimate for our project and our recommendation, which is nearly $800,000 less than the original amount and almost half of what it would be if we built the original project today. So our estimate is a little under $6.5 million. Let's look at First Avenue a little more closely. The width varies from 2 travel lanes with a center turn lane to a 5-lane section up at the intersections. It's got continuous bike lanes. It's got no pedestrian facilities except gravel shoulders. And the pavement condition is rated at 57 PCI, which is in the high end of poor, almost to good. And the roadway is not congested, and we'll get to that a little bit later. If we kind of drill down and look at the lane configurations, this slide will show that up at the intersections of Ina Road to the north and Orange Grove to the south, it's already 5 lanes. It's got two lanes up at the north with 3 turn lanes, and down south it's got 4 through lanes with a left turn lane southbound. The green areas are transitional, and then the middle section in yellow is a 2-lane with a 2-way left turn lane. So as we all know, intersections are where congestion mostly occurs, and we're fortunate in that this roadway has already had those improvements in years past. Widening the roadway segment in the middle really does little to improve congestion relief. And in fact, there would be concerns about faster driving conditions that are not necessarily a benefit to pedestrian, bicyclists, turning vehicles, and the local residents along this roadway. If we look at aerials of those particular locations, you'll see on the left here, that's the intersection of Orange Grove Road, showing the 4 through lanes and the 1 southbound left turn lane. The next photo shows the transitional area, which is a 4-lane section, 2 southbound, 1 northbound, and a center turn lane. The third photo shows 2 through lanes with the 2-way left turn lane in the middle segment. And then up on the right is the intersection of Ina Road, which shows dual left turns, single right turn, 1 through lane northbound, and then 1 through lane southbound. We looked at a lot of data from our own databases and from PAG, and the fact of the matter is traffic volumes have decreased. So this is really important. They've gone down 27% since 2003, from a high of over 17,000 to a low in last year of just over 12,000. This is actually consistent with, I think, what Patrick was explaining with the city's First Avenue project and with a number of roadways in our community that have experienced declines. It's difficult to project the next 20 years, but if we look at the last 18 years of data, it's really clear that there's been a decline that simply doesn't justify the widening to 4 lanes when the current lane configuration is quite sufficient. We also still don't know what the long-term effects of the pandemic might be. And in light of the capacity of this roadway being upwards of 16,000, we're just not there yet. We also looked at crash data, and there were no significant hotspots along this corridor whatsoever. Looking towards the future, the PAG long-range plan for 2045, the RMAP, indicated no congestion either in the year it was adopted, 2020, as well as the year 2045. And we drilled down and looked at some data online now, and the current PAG Safety Explorer indicates the projected volumes at 10,000 to 11,000. So those are probably a little low, I would say, given where we are today, but they certainly aren't trending in the upwards direction. So just a couple more slides here. Pima County is very cognizant of the RTA directive that functionality not be diminished. And we understand that the assumptions about future growth and congestion led to this project being selected in 2006, but the traffic has actually diminished. We're very confident that the functionality will continue to be provided with our recommended project and scope change, and even improve for pedestrians and potentially bicyclists if we can provide enhancements in those areas. So our recommendation and request is to seek agreement from the RTA board to a change in scope, eliminating the 4-lane divided roadway design and maintaining the existing roadway configuration while adding improved pedestrian facilities and bike enhancements where feasible. I want to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good presentation. I have an immediate one. When you mentioned the continuous bike lanes,
Yes.
Your summary says you're just going to restripe the roadway for consistent 6-foot shoulders. So the existing pavement width will accommodate all that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the existing, I mean, at the very least, the bicycle lanes or paved shoulders can be continued into the future. So we wouldn't be adding on pavement width with our estimate, at least. That's what our estimate included. Now, it looks to me, just looking at more closely the striping that exists there today, that there may be some opportunities to put in, for example, say a buffered bike lane in segments where there's some extra pavement. And that's what the county's been doing when we've been redoing some of our pavement pres projects where there's extra pavement. We've been adding in a 2 or 3 foot buffer where it makes sense. But at the very least, we would be replacing the existing bike lanes as they are currently configured. And to the extent possible, we would be trying to enhance those bike lanes if possible.
Okay. Another question on non-vehicular matters. You also note that under concrete sidewalk, and I'm looking at your summary.
Okay.
Embankment widening and miscellaneous, you say provide an ADA pedestrian facility north of Orange Grove on the east side only, but there's no continuous sidewalk or anything of that sort. Is that correct?
The estimate that we put together just showed a pedestrian sidewalk on the east side of First Avenue. I'm going to defer to Catherine or Stephen, because Stephen actually put together the cost estimate on that. So we're not committing to a certain number of linear feet with our proposal, but our estimate, which is at 6.5 million, included just a sidewalk on the east side of the roadway. And I don't recall what the limits are. Steve, do you want to jump in, or Catherine, do you recall?
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely recommending a continuous ADA accessible pathway along the east side of the roadway. South of Orange Grove, the ADA facility is only on the east side of the road. So that would be continuous along that First Avenue corridor. And it'll be some sort of hard surface, constructed surface. We're not looking to use, some sort of stabilized DG. It's going to either be asphalt or concrete. Part of that depends on whether there's curbing, how far it would be separated from the roadway, other aspects of the project that we haven't fully planned out. I'll note, we've been looking at this from a very high level planning estimate standpoint. We haven't engaged with any consultants or anything yet. So this is all in-house, looking at data that we have readily available.
Catherine,
Steve, if you want to.
Oh, go ahead,
John.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know if Steve wanted to add something else on that, because I kind of jumped in on him.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that, everyone, that we did it, and the estimate does include a sidewalk going north of, I think it's the first street there that's north of Orange Grove. There's about a block of existing sidewalk, but then on the east side, but then we continued that sidewalk all the way up to Ina with the estimate, and included 5-foot walk and curb ramps where we needed them at the streets and driveways.
And Steve, with the Keno school located on the west side, you're not, expecting any kind of pedestrian activity north and south of the school?
Well, I don't know for sure. That's something we'd have to look into, but I suspect that most of those folks get driven there.
Right.
I suspect if there does turn out to be some people that walk there, we could take a look at that. But I suspect most of it's just parents dropping off their kid and picking them up.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Other questions?
John, I had a couple of questions, but Catherine already answered them.
Okay. Anybody else? Bob, Bill, Frank?
No, I'm good, John. I
Yeah,
appreciate the presentation.
Thanks.
I would just ask, John, is there a school bus route that stops in this section?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question, Bob, and I'll look. Are you getting at the potential need for a pullout or something like that?
Something like that, Jonathan.
Okay.
I guess, if the school's in the area, there's something on there in the district that has a bus stop.
Yeah, we'll look into that. That's a good question.
And I would just add regarding school that with a continuous pedestrian facility, there may be more kids that are willing to walk to school. It might be safer for them, in which case there might be a need for a pedestrian crossing of some kind at the school as well. And I know you can look at all that later on, but those are all considerations that I think can fall into your contingency category as well. So to me, the cost estimate that Steve put together certainly seems reasonable on this for the scope. And I would encourage you, if you had a choice between putting in 4 feet of concrete and 8 foot of pavement or asphalt sidewalk, to err on the side of something that's maybe a little less permanent, but a little more functional.
Yeah.
Well, so
yeah.
That's all I had to add. Thanks, John. That was a very nice presentation.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, I've got one other question. On the estimate, it says curb, gutter, and ADA ramps, east side only. The curb gutter portion is what threw me a little bit from a drainage standpoint.
Yeah, so I assumed that there would be a curb and gutter along the east side to go along with that sidewalk. And one of the issues that we have is if we don't do that, then the water runs off of the roadway, and then it will deposit gravel and sand across the sidewalk. And that was something that we were trying to avoid. So we were thinking that curb gutter and sidewalk on the east side would be appropriate. And then there would be a number of inlets, drainage inlets that would, capture the water and send it down to the drainages, which typically go from, northeast to southwest in that area.
Okay. That's why you don't really anticipate any need for any drainage control on the west side then?
I didn't see that we really need to do anything if we're not going to add any sidewalk there.
Right. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Jim, is it anything the RTA wants to mention while we're looking at this?
No, not necessarily specific to this. I think just more globally, I think as we start looking at projects and the traffic numbers, we probably ought to circle back and take a look at all the traffic numbers, make sure that we're all comfortable with them, see what's happening in terms of the current trajectory. We know that there have been changes associated with what we've been experiencing due to the pandemic, and we are going to be going into another planning, long-range planning effort. But probably the bigger question in my mind is, what's happening, not just on the individual corridor, but around it, and how that might influence things. So,
Okay, thank you. All right, anybody have anything else on this project for now? Obviously, I think the task force members will digest the information we've received today, and then Ana Olivares' March 1st letter, and then start drafting our findings.
Yeah, John, Bill seems to have his hand up.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
he's also muted.
Oh, yeah, Bill, you're muted. You're muted, Bill. Hello? There you go.
Sorry. You may have already covered it, Jonathan. I may have just missed it. But in your proposal for the alternative, what kind of a contingency did you use on your construction cost?
I don't have it up in front of me. I bet John Bernal does.
Yeah.
It's 30%.
Yeah.
30% of
Yeah.
1.1 million.
That's very reasonable. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Good, thanks, Bill.
Jonathan, just,
Okay.
and John, I'd like to thank county staff for adding all of this level of detail to the proposed scope change.
Okay.
Frankly, I think there was a little bit of shell shock with the initial request, which looked like you simply wanted to abandon the project. And we kind of knew that's not what you intended, and this makes excellent sense.
Yeah.
So good, great, thank you.
Well, thank
Thanks.
you. Yeah, good point, Chris. Thank you. All right, well, let's move on to item 3 then. The City of Tucson First Avenue Grant Road to River Road project. We had the presentation at the last meeting. We have some information that has been provided to us through the RTA sources. Anybody got any immediate observations? Kurt, I think you might have had something to do with traffic information.
Yeah, I did. I looked through I think it was the June 21 final report. And I initially had some questions about the performance of the cross streets. The schematic for the improvements didn't show any changes at all. Additional lanes and the like, which typically we see with corridor projects. We do see some enhancements to the cross street intersections. So Jim and Patrick provided the synchro reports to me, and so I started looking at the synchro reports, and I saw obviously some improvement in the north-south on First Avenue, but there seemed to be some degradation in the east-west performance, and I didn't have the existing condition synchro files to look at, but that then begged the question of what happens in the parallel corridors as well, and the modeling effort, which I think then led into some questions about what forecasts are the correct ones to use as well. So what I would suggest, John, since there's some, I think there's general consistency amongst the task force and general concurrence that all of the functionality of the 6-lane project remains in the 4-lane project. We just have some questions that would be resolved, I think, with a bit more technical analysis, just to assuage yourself that the performance of this corridor, the cross streets and the parallel streets, particularly Stone Avenue and potentially Campbell, that everything is going to be functioning just fine. And that's where the PAG, some additional PAG modeling, which I think Jim can talk about a little bit, would help. So what I would suggest is perhaps a follow-up discussion with the city to talk about some of those nuances. And if there's a couple of other technical tools that might be used to just fully assuage us that that the corridor and the parallel corridors are going to work well with the 4-lane. I personally don't have a problem with the 4-lane configuration. From an urban form perspective, I think that it's more suitable to that environment, but we just have to make sure that capacity and operation wise, it's fine, notwithstanding that all those functionalities are going to be met. So that's what I had to add, John.
Jim, do you want to add anything from the traffic modeling perspective?
Well, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things we've had some conversations internally about what we might be able to add to the conversation in terms of additional information. We know that I know that at least one of our board members had asked about what's happening on parallel corridors, and I think that's something that if you'd like, we could ask our modeling team to make a presentation at the next meeting, talking about the about what we're seeing, between, if we were to model the 2045 network and compare it 2-lane or 4-lane and 6-lane alternatives, what might we need to look at? Where would the, is traffic being changed in other parallel corridors and the intersecting corridors? I think it holds for both of the both projects, both the First Avenue North and the First Avenue South. And I would also recommend that we have a conversation with the designer on this before we have that conversation, because there's no benefit to us dueling over numbers. I think we ought to be sitting down and having a conversation about what we see as common.
Yeah.
Right, and that would be, I think, the intent of a meeting with the city is basically to lay out a scope of work, and I want staff to recognize we're not trying to beat this to death. I think we're about 95% of the way there. But if you look at this effort as basically establishing a protocol for RTA Next on how to handle, with the previous work that Jim has done, how to handle deletion of projects, addition of projects, and in this case, scope modifications. And going back to 2006, I kind of wish that we had predicted that there would be requests for scope changes and how they could easily be addressed. That way we wouldn't be sorting this out right now. But I think we're in the process of perfecting that protocol so that for the RTA Next, there'll be basically a policy and a procedure established for how to deal with these kinds of issues and what technical tools need to be pulled out of the toolbox to help get to the answers.
Yeah.
So,
well, Curtis, I know you mentioned this before. 2006, I think there was a strong desire to make sure we had the public's confidence behind us. And I think that's why we had so much rigidity in our descriptions. But your point's well taken about what we might do better going forward. Robin, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to add a comment on the parallel roadways. I believe that report did, at least that we did on First Avenue, did at least look at the two parallel corridors on either side of First Avenue. So that portion is already looked at with those same numbers. Point well taken, though. We want to make sure we're all using the appropriate numbers. And as far as the cross streets, the perpendicular streets are concerned, I would say that with the right intersection design, it's not going to be really radically different whether there's through lanes on First or not. So then I wonder, I mean, that's obviously a good exercise for PAG to go through as an entire network look, just to understand which projects are maybe best for RTA Next and the like. But I would just say I don't really see, as long as those intersections are properly designed, whether through streets on First would have a huge impact on the cross streets farther down the line. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Bill, did you have something? Bill Carroll? No? Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else? Anything else? So we're really saying that we'll have two follow-up actions on this item, that we will schedule an opportunity with the city of Tucson to further dig into their traffic figures, and we'll do that in some kind of a face-to-face or virtual meeting between ourselves and the city and the RTA staff, I imagine. And then secondly, perhaps, Jim, did you say at our next meeting we could have some discussion about modeling?
Mr. Chair, I know we're trying to charge through all of these. Yeah, that would be my goal, is to have a a presentation from our modeling team on what we're seeing. And I think, I was not aware that the city had analyzed the parallel routes as well. I think we were kind of focused on the what had happened on the main or on First Avenue. I think look at how they compare. Look at how what numbers we're looking at. What I would propose is to try to have a presentation at the next meeting 2 weeks from now, and in the meantime set up a time when we can have a conversation between our team and the design team. That way, we're all looking at the same stuff.
So Jim, you do know what specific report Robin was referring to, that we find that information?
I will. I am not familiar with it, but I will. I'll certainly get with Robin and with her design team to look at it,
and then make that available to us. Correct?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we looked at it as part of the report, but I think maybe I'm just remembering a conversation as the feasibility report was put together. So it's very possible that our designer did do a quick look at the parallel corridors, because I remember having a brief conversation about what that does to the parallel corridors.
Sure.
So we'll ask them if they have additional information, but I remember the discussion on that. That's where that's coming from.
Sure. Yeah, I would have anticipated you did have a discussion on that topic, Robin. The other thing that I'd requested last week, and I'm hoping we can still have that provided to us, is to all somebody needs to do is pen and ink on a couple of the exhibits that were in the June 26th final report. They add some of the level of service for the other movements. There we have just the only performance indices that we have in that report are for First Avenue and not for any of the turning movements on the cross streets under the existing conditions or under the 4 options. So if that could still be done, that would, I think, be helpful. Thank you.
So Robin, is that request going to be easy to comply with, or you okay
well,
with
if we
it?
want to do another traffic study or level of traffic study, I'd like actually a complete list from you of all the various things you'd like our consultant to do. And we can determine what the cost of that will be.
Sure. Well, what I'm asking for, Robin, is probably 1 hour of somebody's work. I could do it myself, but I would rather have somebody from the consulting team do it. I wouldn't doubt that they have that map someplace, in a file, because typically the maps that are prepared for this do indeed show the level of service for all of the turning movements at the intersections and not for just the subject one. So I wouldn't doubt that Kittleson has that information already. I could do it myself, except I don't have the existing condition sync over.
Yeah, understood. I wasn't running that. It's just that I don't in my hands have a complete list. You've asked for several things. I think there was wanted to evaluate the cross streets. You wanted to evaluate and how fully do you want to evaluate the adjacent streets, and is that something you want our consultant to go ahead and do?
Well,
I guess that's what I'm looking for. Because it's quite a list, really, of traffic analysis, and I just want to make sure I understand. You want the same level of analysis on Stone and Oracle that we did on First, or on? I mean,
well, yeah, I think Robin, I think the intent is, and John can holler if I'm not right, is for us to meet and basically establish not only a scope of analysis, but to agree on what base numbers need to be used. So this analysis can be done only once. And having done these kinds of things before, I'm thinking it's probably under $20,000 and probably under 2 weeks of effort. I don't think it's that big of a deal to do this. But obviously we want to only do it once, and we want to all agree on the inputs. So
and so that's why I wanted to make sure, if they happen to have all those turning movements, then fine and dandy, right? And that's all you're asking short term. What I again, exactly what you said, I do not want to go into a whole thing where we do a full system analysis and then find out that you guys decided a different set of numbers was more.
Great. Yeah, this is kind of the basic premise of the traffic reports that are written for agencies now, is that the proponent and the agency sits down and agrees on what numbers are going to be used, what forecast horizon, what analytical tools, and how the report's going to be presented, basically establishing a scope of work. And I think we could probably do that in a 1-hour meeting fairly easily, particularly if your consultants are there. The other thing I wanted to add is that, we did prepare kind of a draft format for these project reviews, and we have drafted one for First Avenue. It's nowhere near ready for a public review, but I think shortly after we get this final level of analysis done, we'll be able to get a very clean draft of our analysis. You can then take a look at it, and then we can get this thing out to the public. And we can all move on with it. So I think we're almost there. I hope nobody's feeling frustrated about this. We're just kind of, I wouldn't say weeding our way through. And I don't want to use the word assuage again, although I just did. We all want to feel comfortable that we're making the right recommendation or an appropriate recommendation.
Well, look, we're moving along very well with these meetings every 2 weeks. And I think, Robin, we can schedule a meeting with city staff to talk about the scope of what Kurt's been describing, and then go beyond that for a subsequent meeting if need be with you all with the results. I mean, I think that's one way to do it. So I think we can take the time necessary to be clear about our request and then give you some time to prepare it. So.
Yes, thank you. That's really what I was looking for, is some clarity, because there's just a lot of conversation, and I don't want to duplicate any efforts.
Right, exactly. And we did have a sidebar conversation with the RTA folks about the costs associated with these studies, Robin, and they seemed like they should be attributable to the project themselves. So, in fairness, I think we can, with the RTA, work out who's responsible for this, and that the city doesn't take a big hit itself, or any hit.
Now you're making me nervous, Curtis.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you do understand that so far none of the RTA funding has been spent on this at all.
Yes.
So any repetitive work at this point is all city cost. And I would say that we were recently given a list of things that were not attributable to RTA, and one of them was redesign. So if I have to do another set of numbers, I want to be absolutely sure that they're not going to count this as another redesign.
Right. Well, I just wanted to throw that out there. Obviously, you need to resolve that with the Jim on this, but yeah. So anyhow, there should be fairness coming out of this whole process.
And Robin, while we're at it, since we're talking about having a discussion about some further details, we had, if you recall, some conversation about the drainage coming across First Avenue in this region. And I think there may still be some need for us to be clear about how significant that drainage work will be, particularly in Navajo Wash and dealing with things of that sort. So
the city's design parameters on a major thoroughfare like First are to have one lane in each direction, dry enough for emergency vehicles during a 100-year event. And that would be the design level that we would want to design the future project to. Anything upstream or downstream that has anything to do with regional flood control, we'd work out with regional flood control.
Okay, right. Well, that's the specifics that I'm dealing with, though. So you're saying to meet that City of Tucson requirement, you don't have to necessarily do something upstream in form of a retention basin or anything of that sort?
I don't know at this time. We don't have that level of design yet.
Okay.
But John and Robin, I think those drainage issues are the same regardless of the 4 or 6 lane cross section.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so because they are the same for the 4 or the 6, we had anticipated doing that as a part of the final design. And we would include Pima County Flood Control in the event there is something that they can help with up or downstream, or that we can do differently up or downstream.
Good.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Anything else from any of the task force members? Jim, anything from you, Mr. DeGrood?
No, Mr. Chair, only that we will be looking at meeting again in 2 weeks. We'll be reaching out to the city and the city's design team to talk with our traffic modelers and see what we can come up with in terms of an understanding of where we're at and what we would want to potentially analyze in addition. And my expectation is that we would be able to do that within the next week or so, and that way we can make sure we've got the agenda set for the next meeting.
Jim, as a clarification on that, I think we were on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays, and since March has 5 weeks, it would be 3 weeks in between. Okay. Unless you wanted to stick with an every 2 week thing. I just caught that.
Okay. I appreciate your clarifying that, Rick.
No, I just double checked.
Well, I would prefer to just stick with the every 2 weeks, John, and group, whatever you guys think.
That's what I was going to say. How does the rest of the group feel? You okay with every 2 weeks? Seems like we're okay. If that doesn't squeeze you, Jim, we'd like to keep going at this pace.
All right, well, let's keep her rocking and rolling.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Yeah, Robin, go ahead.
If you're going to want city here, can we have that on our calendars too, so we can plan a little in advance? Thank you.
You bet. You bet. All right. Anything else?
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
right.
The meeting is adjourned.